Hello everyone, Tyler King here with another episode of New Review. Today I'm going to be reviewing the 1984 Gary Numan album, Berserker. So Berserker is released in November of 1984. It is Gary Numan's first album he releases on his own label, Numa Records. This is a move so he can have complete creative control over his output. And the lineup on this album features the usual cast. You have Chris Payne, Russell Bell, Cedric Sharpley, John Webb, and Tracy Ackerman, the backing vocalist from the Warriors album, returns to sing on Berserker as well. However, despite the fact that Gary does employ the usual suspects on this album, it has a much different feel to it than the funk-infused I Assassin and Warriors albums that preceded this one. If anything, the reliance on this album is less on the bass and more on the guitar, and more so than anything that he had done in between this album and Telecon in 1980. So jumping right in, the first song is the title track, Berserker. It opens up in a very dramatic fashion with Tracy Ackerman and the other female backing vocalist on this album, Tessa Niles, saying, "I've been waiting for you, I've waited far too long," before the album opens up into this very fast-paced sampled percussion. And the song explodes into this very wailing guitar, these very ominous keyboards, and Tracy and Tessa ask, "Do you want to come with me now?" And it's this very dramatic opening to the album, and it's much more dramatic. It catches your attention much more than any of the opening songs pretty much since this Wreckage on Telecon. And the first minute or so on here is so direct, it is to the point, and it's so damn good, it almost makes you forget the missteps that Gary Numan has done on his last couple of albums up to this point. And once Gary does start singing, he's singing about being lost, he's singing about somebody coming to find him, and this is going to be a lyrical theme throughout this album. Gary has even said in interviews that he didn't really have a specific theme when he was writing the lyrics for this album. He just wanted there to be this ominous feeling to it. The "Do you want to come with me" refrain is sang an infinite number of times, but the song is so good it doesn't really matter. The second song, This Is New Love, has this very dramatic opening with this stuttering sampled bass and Gary going, "Ugh." The proper intro of the song has this very funky bass playing over it. It feels a little bit reminiscent of something from Warriors, not as downright funky though. And it has this very slinky guitar that's played over top of it. Gary sings in that kind of mumbly way he's been doing it since the Dance album. But when Tracy or Tessa, one of them, sings Picture the Man When the Heartbeat Stops, there's this very interesting warbly synth sound going behind them. Unfortunately, immediately after that, we are treated to a saxophone solo. Woo! And then another complaint about this song in particular is the length of it. 3 minutes in, I'm waiting for it to end, and I'm only halfway through the goddamn thing. Gary uses another homophobic slur in it, kind of like he did on the closing track on Warriors, The Rhythm of the Evening. He says, "These boys of passion will rule the world, put their fingers in a dike, well, you know that's what she needed." And it's an interesting line. It's almost seems to be about these guys who are molesting or raping this lesbian character and saying like, "Oh, well, you know, she wants a guy and we're gonna make her straight," kind of thing. But it doesn't do anything for the song. And like the phrase he used on The Rhythm of the Evening, it's not really a line I ever needed to have heard Gary say, ever. And just the whole second half of the song just feels very unneeded, unnecessary. The third song on the album is The Secret. It opens up with this synth melody. It reminds me a little bit of Metal off of the Pleasure Principle before we're treated to some guitar and some slapped bass. The first verse just kind of goes by, but then the chorus hits and I'm just like, fuck, David Bowie is singing on a Gary Numan album? But no, it's not David Bowie. It's Zane Griff doing his best David Bowie impression on the chorus. There's some warbling guitar behind Zane's vocals while he sings, and the song, it's not bad, it's just really unmemorable. Luckily, the next song is My Dying Machine, which opens up with a much faster tempo, and Gary, Tracy, and Tessa are singing one of the more memorable vocal melodies on the album, opening up the song with the questions, why give orders, why give speeches? Beyond that, though, Gary is singing again about running and hiding, and it's not that interesting. Instrumentally, though, the song is all this driving, sampled percussion and these very ominous keyboard lines. And instrumentally, everything that is going on this song works, and this is one of the more memorable songs that is going to be on this album. After that, we have Cold Warning, which opens with Chris Payne doing this just outstanding viola solo, and this is the first time that we've heard this instrument since Telecon. And then once that finishes, the song opens up and it's a little bit sparse, a little bit ominous sounding. The lyrics again are dealing with Gary hiding from something. In particular, on this song, he's hiding from Cold Warning. The chorus literally is just the line, "Cold warning comes for me," repeated over and over again. In an interesting line in the song, he says, "Beg to your gods, but I don't believe." And that's kind of hinting at the whole atheism thing that he's going to be singing about from 1994 onwards. There's squalling guitars all over the thing. There's much more viola that comes in as the song goes on. And Cold Warning stands out. It doesn't just stand out on the album, it stands out as one of the best songs from the middle period of Gary Numan's career. And it's fitting that the song is called Cold Warning because the album itself has this very icy, this very cool, this very cold and ominous feeling to it. And it's perfectly reflected in the album cover. Gary Numan is presenting himself with this icy blue hair, icy blue lipsticks, icy blue mascara, icy blue eyebrows, icy blue eyeliner, and it's this very dramatic, this very shocking, this very cold image of him presented on the album cover. Unfortunately, after Cold Warning, we have Pump It Up, which is the worst song on the album. It opens with the backing vocalist saying, "Pump me up!" And then we're treated to some sax and some funky bass. And then Gary, just like in complete deadpan, he says, "Won't you come in and play with me?" And it's just like, no, I won't. The song just feels like a half-cooked leftover from the Warriors album that didn't make it on it, and then Gary just heard it and decided to just slap it onto the Berserker album, and it just feels out of place, and I don't like it. After that, we have the God film. It's a little bit more sparse than Pump It Up. These very noticeable piano lines being hit throughout the song. Lyrically, it feels reminiscent of a song off of the Dance album. Gary is with this woman he doesn't really seem particularly happy to be with. He almost feels ashamed to be with her. He actually refers to her as a pink shame. Unfortunately, though, it's just not a very memorable song, especially considering the next song, which is A Child with the Ghost. And A Child with the Ghost is a song that Gary writes for Paul Gardner following his passing. Paul Gardner was the bassist of Two Way Army, and he was the bassist of of Gary Numan's band up through and including the Telecon album. He also co-wrote and played keyboards on Gary Numan's Dance album, but in February of 1984, Paul Gardner passes away of an intentional heroin overdose. And of course, based on the subject matter, this is the saddest song on the album. This is one of Gary Numan's sadder songs throughout the course of his career, and he seems to be sitting down, looking at this picture of Paul, just waiting for the picture to start talking to him and just wishing that it would happen. And in the chorus he says, "If I had one wish, I'd wish to talk to you. I have some questions that only you can know." And again, it mentions his disdain of God just passingly, and retreating again to another saxophone solo. It's not wholly out of place on this song, but it kind of takes you out from this very sad, depression, melancholic feeling that he's trying to invoke on this song. Granted, this is a very beautiful, moving song regardless of the saxophone. The final song on the album is The Hunter. It opens with this very ominous keyboard tone. It's very similar to something like Steel and You from the very first Two Way Army album, just a little less noisy. The tempo for the song is a little bit faster, and unlike the last couple of albums, it actually serves as a fitting closing song on the album. This one's a little bit more up-tempo, it's a little bit more rock feeling, and it's just really fun. I wish it could have gone on a little bit longer, but it's a nice way to end the album. And that's Berserker. So Berserker is an album that I hold in higher regard than the previous couple of albums he had released, which are I, Assassin and Warriors. Warriors in particular is an album that I tend to forget exists, whether it be willing or unwilling. And Berserker just feels more like Berserker could have been the follow-up to Telecon. Like it almost feels like Gary Numan's discography should go Telecon, Berserker, Dance, I, Assassin, and then everything after that. And it's unfortunate because he seems to have hit this almost kind of industrial feeling on this album, and that is going to be absent from the next four or five albums of Gary Numan's career following this. And I did mention in my reviews for I, Assassin and Warriors that Gary Numan's discography, as you go throughout the 80s, gets progressively worse and worse, but Berserker is the one album that is the exception to that rule. I feel like, especially after the disappointment that Warriors is, Berserker does see Gary Numan coming back in a way that I wish he would have throughout the rest of the decade. The album is much more fun, it is much more aggressive, and it's much more memorable than most of the material from his previous two albums. If I could pick 3 favorite songs from the album, it would of course be the opening song, Berserker, it would be Cold Warning, and it would probably also be A Child with the Ghost. And you know what, fuck it, let's put My Dying Machine on there as well, because My Dying Machine is really good. Least favorite songs are definitely going to be Pump It Up, This Is New Love, and The God Film. And from here, it gets worse. It gets worse from here on out. And it sucks, because this album is actually pretty good. I'm going to give it a solid 7 out of 10. It's not my favorite Gary Numan album. It's definitely not my least favorite Gary Numan album. But it's one that I do go back to on occasion, especially when I do want to listen to material from the middle part of Gary Numan's career. This album is really the highlight of that period. That's my review of Berserker. So, what did you think? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Is Berserker your least favorite Gary Numan album? Is it your favorite Gary Numan album? Does it bring you back to a specific time in your life? please leave any comments in the comment box below. Next up is going to be Gary Numan's 1985 album, The Fury. But, in the meantime, this is Tyler King with New Review. Gary Numan, Berserker. 7 out of 10.